We're going to take a break from the live swimming action here at the Betty Kelly Canning Aquatic Center and send it over to our Robinson Road studios for NV12 News with Paige Ferguson. Paige?
Thanks, Nakia, and good evening, Bahamas. You're tuned in to NV12, broadcasting from Cable Pro Studios on Robinson Road. Coming up tonight in news, major changes in the voting process proposed in the House of Assembly today. This as the government prepares to bring forward legislation regarding the death penalty. An American baseball star previously charged with rape walks out of court a free man. The government recently supported the UN stance on gay rights, but what do you think? Plus, cabinet ministers tour the new national stadium. We've got those stories and so much more coming up. I'm Paige Ferguson, and NV12 starts right now. Overhaul of the Parliamentary Elections Act was introduced in the House of Assembly today, calling for drastic changes to voter registration, voting, and the introduction of special voters categories through amendments. Christina McNeil has more on this landmark piece of legislation that will significantly change the voting process inside and outside the country.
The Prime Minister today introduced proposed amendments to the Parliamentary Elections Act, legislation that may change who votes when and where. With the introduction of the amendments to the Parliamentary Elections Act come major revisions to the act affecting Bahamians in the Bahamas and abroad. The proposed amendments allow for the registration of students, staff members at embassies, high commissions and other overseas missions, their spouses and members of their immediate families. And most notably, for the first time ever, the act would allow for voting outside the Bahamas. The amendments empower the Parliamentary Commissioner to establish polling places outside the Bahamas at embassies, high commissions, or foreign missions of the Bahamas. Voting at those polls will take place on the same day as the advanced poll in the Bahamas the week before the general election. Changes to the act also create a new category of special voters, which includes those residing in hospitals or nursing homes, the ill, and those who have recently given birth, a candidate or spouse of a candidate, or anyone else living overseas on polling day. Special circumstances would also be granted for members of the police and defense forces who would not be required to vote in their polling division. Regarding protest votes, only individuals who have voters' cards but whose names do not appear on the register for the relevant constituency or polling division would be eligible for the protest vote. The Parliamentary Commissioner would also have more checks in place to ensure a clean registry and that only those persons eligible to vote in the Bahamas may do so. Amendments grant the Parliamentary Commissioner access to passport and immigration records to ensure the eligibility of voters. Meanwhile, subsections require the Registrar General to send the Parliamentary Commissioner a list of the names of all adults who have died in the preceding 3-month period. The Superintendent of Prisons to send a list every 3 months of persons serving a sentence, and allows the Parliamentary Commissioner to investigate, verify, and remove the names of persons who have died or may be serving a sentence from the voters list. Those were just a few of the amendments put forth for the Parliamentary Elections Act. Leader of the Opposition, Perry Christie, submitted a list of recommendations to government, but they were not included in the act. Christie says Ingram indicated that the opposition's recommendations for the amendments were taken into consideration. However, some of the recommendations were considered too radical for the current legislative term. Christie says experts are poring over the proposed amendments now to determine whether or not the proposed changes put forth by government are radical.
The ability for people to register and vote abroad, most certainly to vote abroad in council offices, that requires tremendous resources to monitor, to ensure the integrity of the process. And even though it is a part of our recommendation, we regard that as a radical change to what exists today.
However, Christie says the proposed amendments do not take campaign finance reform into account.
We did not put out any detailed recommendations on financial reform. what we indicated was that we wanted to see how far the government was going, and then we would come with our recommendations.
Christie says the opposition intends to make its recommendations for the act public in the coming days. Reporting for NB12, I'm Christina McNeil.
Well, Prime Minister Hubert Ingraham also announced that the government will bring to Parliament before its summer recess a bill to deal with the imposition of the death penalty in the Bahamas. Ingraham did not specify what the specifics of the bill are. The announcement came a week after the Privy Council handed down an important ruling in the Max Otito matter. With a report, here's our Candia Dames.
The recent ruling of the Privy Council in the Max Otito matter, as well as previous rulings from the Privy Council, have set a very strict standard for the imposition of the death penalty here in the Bahamas. Still, prosecutors here at the Office of the Attorney General continue to seek the death penalty, and they're hopeful that new procedures put in place will move these cases through the system much more quickly.
Those restrictions on the death penalty have continued to be placed on jurisdictions like the Bahamas. As we widely reported last week, Max Otito was convicted of the brutal 2002 murder of 16-year-old Donnell Conover, but the Privy Council said it was not the worst of the worst murder, even though her skull was crushed and her body was burnt. Deputy Director of Public Prosecutions Garvin Gaskin said today that prosecutors must proceed with the murder cases they are handling based on this standard.
There are several matters that we are seeking. There is a matter that is currently before the appellate courts, and so yes, they're in train, and we will absolutely have to justify that those sentences were in compliance with the principles that have been set out by the Privy Council.
Bishop Simeon Hall, who headed the government-appointed Crime Council, believes the time has long passed for the Bahamas to abandon the Privy Council and to resume executions.
I think, as someone has suggested, that it's time for persons who want to make appeal to the Privy Council for civil matter and other legal things to use the Privy Council. But certainly in the case of murder, I think it's time for us to do our own thing. It is very difficult to remain philosophical on murder now. You know, the criminals seem to be getting the better end of the stick.
When we spoke to the mother of 16-year-old Donnell Conover in a story we brought you just last week, she expressed outrage that the Privy Council quashed the death sentence of Max Otito.
Maxo should not even have to spend 5 years waiting for no ruling of the Privy Council. Just when they handed down the death penalty, it only should have taken months before they sent him to the gallows. You know, and he laughing and he rejoicing over this. You understand me? Whilst I'm here grieving.
Now, of course, there are many who are awaiting the details of that death penalty bill foreshadowed by the Prime Minister today, but there are others who believe that as long as the Privy Council remains the final court of appeal for the Bahamas, it will continue to have the last say as it relates to the death penalty. Reporting for NB12, I'm Candia Dames.
Well, on Friday, the Bahamas government supported a resolution by the United Nations Human Rights Council that affirms equal rights for gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people. According to Deputy Prime Minister Brent Simonet, the government supports the expansion of rights for people of any persuasion, while today Nikita Bow asked various groups in the Bahamas how they felt about the move.
It's a move that caught many Bahamians off guard and one that they were very vocal about. Today we heard from the Bahamas Christian Council, a human rights activist, and members of the public who all shared differing views on the Bahamas' support of gay rights. In a statement released this afternoon, the Bahamas Christian Council said it supports the resolution in principle and agrees that everyone has rights to protection against violence and discrimination. However, BCC President Ranford Patterson wrote that the Council strongly believes the resolution is a move towards something much greater. The BCC questioned what gay rights are and made it clear that the Christian Church believes only in marriage between a man and a woman. Patterson ended the statement by asking the country's leaders to guard against any possible hidden agenda. And as for members of the public, they told our news team today that they were outraged by the government's decision and that they're completely against the resolution.
That's a bunch of garbage, straight up.
So you don't agree with the move?
I don't agree with that at all, 100% no.
The government is in power, and I guess they do as they see fit.
But do you agree with the move, or?
No, I don't.
No, I mean, no, because it's too much of that churn bond and thinking us right and stuff like that.
No, I do not agree with them supporting gay rights. I mean, because the Bible speaks clearly about people who choose their sex to go to the opposite sex, you know, I mean, to go to the same sex. No.
On the other end of the spectrum, noted human rights activist Aaron Green, who has been very vocal about gay and lesbian rights over the years, commended the government and encouraged Bahamians to read and gain a better understanding of the resolution before making their determinations.
This is a great move. For a country that identifies as a Christian nation, this is a step towards that kingdom that we seem to be building. We're not talking about changing the laws to say that gays are okay. We're talking about the Good Samaritan principle, which is take care of those even if you don't agree with what they agree with. I mean, this is a very Christian move, and we should be happy and encouraged by it.
Reporting for NB12, I'm Nakia DeVoe.